Yeah, look, we're all great beneficiaries of media support, and as footy fans, we watch it and listen to it, and they invest a lot in the game. But I think that the great editorial test, deciding whether to publish or not, or whether something's in the public interest. And so I think the trouble is we've moved the test to sort of what the public might be interested in, and they're worlds apart. And so that's the landscape we're in. They're worlds apart, and we all understand the landscape changes, and that's just the way it is. But it's just the willingness to push into that real private space, and feed that salacious type. That's where it's getting really nasty and concerning.
I think you're right. When anything invades someone's private world, that's very difficult. But I just sort of disagree a little bit with the theme that it's a real poor me to be a role model. I think that in today's day and age is such a privilege, and some place you could really exact some change and some influence, especially on young people. And so I'd like to see people really kind of rejoice that they're suddenly a role model, acknowledging that it would be very, very difficult, I agree, to have people...
I have to say, Angela, I completely agree with you. Yes, we have another question. We might... just a couple more. Yeah.
I look around the audience tonight and there's quite a few females here. If this was a meeting of people in senior positions from the AFL and the clubs, I suspect there'd be quite a few less. Is there a cultural need for more women in senior position in the AFL and the clubs?
Look, if I wanted to be a bit of a commo just for 5 seconds...
Go for it.
I'd be looking forward to the time when you have an Occupy AFL movement.
Yeah.
When you got the 99%,
yeah,
in fact calling the 1% to answer.
Yep.
Why is it that a woman with 3 children who wants to go to the footy and show these kids a bit of a thrill, the only thrill they're going to have in the whole week, and she can't afford to go into the ground?
Yes.
See, why is it that we've got this aura of these people living on top of Mount Olympus? They're being paid how much?
Fair bit.
A lot of money. And he can't kick the goal.
Well, that's...
I mean, the arguments that are going on in the stands and in the bleachers are, in fact, as you said, ma'am, far different from the discussion, intellectual
yes,
discussion that we'd be having. I think you've got to get closer to those grassroots. I honestly do.
Yep.
And they deserve it. The grassroots deserve one place in their lives where they can go and, in fact, everybody's an expert.
Mm-hmm.
There's no expert standing over them saying, no, we can't run the show this way. Everybody's an expert in footy.
That's one of the great things about it.
And that's the one time in a democracy when that feeling, it's a feeling. I think we need more feeling in AFL than thinking.
Which perhaps leads back to the question that we might need more women involved in the clubs,
well,
Benny.
Well, blokes are thinking more now than ever, feeling more now than ever.
Yes,
see?
That's
feeling
true.
What?
Benny?
Look, the short answer is absolutely yes. I think it'd be terrific.
Totally.
I think good decisions are made by people who come together in diverse backgrounds, and I think that's great for any workplace.
Agreed.
So I couldn't agree more strongly. Whether the observation's actually true, I don't think senior levels of football clubs are that out of step with senior levels of professional services firms or law firms or accounting. I don't think it's that out of step.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. I was speaking to the head of the Navy a couple of years ago, who said to me the best thing that's happened to the Navy is the increased amount of women involved. I think it's up to 35% now. Massive change in culture. All for the better, as you would imagine. They're desperately keen to get it up to 50-50, which obviously was for centuries a male domain. And you would think, and you would hope that one day there'll be a female CEO of a footy club. Why not? I don't think anyone would say that's silly, would they? We have a question to the left. Hi.
Hi, question for Brendon, but really for the panel if anyone else wants to answer. And going back to social media, Alastair, you, just stemming from Alastair's earlier comment, mentioned that it's really, social media is maybe not, it's something that's generally out there in the community, so you can't really prohibit your players from participating or twittering, being on Facebook. Brendon, what are your thoughts on that in relation to sponsors? Like if you have a club sponsor, do you then say to your players, these are the things you can and can't say? Because the repercussions come back to the club. It's not dissimilar to Kyle and Jackie O and Austereo being penalised for Kyle's behaviour and advertisers dropping out.
Yeah, look, I didn't want to dismiss social. I don't subscribe to it myself. I don't really understand it, but our media people do. Our commercial people know the power of it to sort of communicate, and so look, our players, they don't hide things, but they know right from wrong, and I guess they're trained on, there's a lot of sort of IP in football clubs. There's a lot of sort of secrets, and you like to keep things in house about the way you do. So sometimes guys are a bit loose, but certainly it's really important they reflect the values of the club and the values of those who support and invest in the club. And I mean, a lot of time and effort goes into educating them about what is right from wrong and making sure they're informed. So I didn't want to sound flippant before.
We'll have one more question here.
We've talked a lot about the game tonight, and I think for me it comes down to the AFL and the clubs themselves as two, not separate, but different responsibilities.
Yes.
So the AFL seems to bring a lot to amongst all of these issues. So they've got, Auskick, and they run fantastic advertising campaigns that tell us that the AFL is all about excitement and enjoyment. And it always feels like you've got the clubs letting it down. Do you feel that the clubs do more than the minimum required, or do you think they go beyond that?
Listen, I think the AFL clubs have been first class, and the AFL too. They've been pioneers in so many things in world sport, and I look at in our particular case with our club. The great difficulty of what's happened with AFL clubs in the last 20 years as it's become professional. Our game actually grew where it was quite tribal. Collingwood versus Richmond, and if you played for Collingwood, you probably grew up in Collingwood, and if you played for Richmond, you grew up in Richmond. And our competition in the last 20 years is. Then they said not only will you have players coming from Collingwood, but you'll also have a zone in Victoria where you can draw players from, which for Collingwood was down around Hamilton and Ararat and that sort of area, and where I grew up in a little place called Conniva, that was Essendon zone. And but the game changed enormously, and what became very, very difficult was there was no longer reason for the Collingwood Footy Club or Essendon for that matter to go to Horsham or Conniva, where I grew up, to invest in the game, because they knew that they couldn't get players from that area just when they wanted to. They could invest as much time as they liked into that area, but another club could pick up that player through the draft. So what has evolved over the last 10 or 20 years is this responsibility by the AFL and the clubs to try and stretch to all of Australia. And indeed, now we're going to New Zealand. We're trying to go into South Africa. Benny's going to take his crew to India. We're going all around the world to try and draw in supporters and players. It's an enormous responsibility for football clubs. I think they do it as well as they possibly can. Now, some of it is for reasons of expanding so that we can have a greater interest in the game and more money coming into the game. But some of it is just taking the game to as far as we can in terms of to be a good influence on young people. I only look at our footy club and the AFL's role in the Indigenous. And our footy club, until the last 10 or 20 years, had very, very few Aboriginal players in the club. For 80 or 90 years, they had this view that, for whatever reason, that Aboriginals weren't going to be part of the Hawthorn Footy Club. The Mighty Pies had exactly the same. I'm proud now to say that the Hawthorn Footy Club is probably the leading club in the AFL in terms of giving Indigenous players an opportunity. But we've had to evolve in very, very difficult circumstances. I said, from that tribal where everything was just on your doorstep, to then having zones and then having them abolished, and now our responsibility as a code and as clubs was to now expand to all of Australia. It's been enormously difficult, but I think with the help of the AFL and their direction and their responsibility to throw a lot of money behind it, we've we've made some real gains in that area. But like we said, we've still got a long way to go in some of those areas, but we're certainly on track, and I think we're the leader probably of all sports in the country.
Please thank Father Bob, Benny, Angela, Alastair Clarkson.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.